The late afternoon sun dripped gold across the shimmering surface of the pool, turning the water into a vast, liquid sapphire. Laughter, clear and bright, echoed off the patio stones as 9-year-old Lily cannonballed in, sending a geyser of crystal spray skyward. Her younger brother, Max, a chaotic blur of limbs and flailing floaties, shrieked with delight. Arthur Sterling watched them from his worn Adirondack chair, a rare, uncomplicated smile gracing his usually burdened face. This pool, his oasis, was more than just concrete and chlorine. It was the heart of their summer, the keeper of countless memories, and the one place he truly felt peace. For 15 years, this backyard had been his refuge, a private kingdom carved out of a cookie-cutter subdivision. Then, the letter arrived. It was tucked, stiff and formal, beneath a stack of junk mail, its pristine white envelope a stark contrast to the colorful flyers. The sender, the Grand Oaks Homeowners Association. Arthur felt an immediate, unpleasant prickle down his spine. The HOA, a bureaucratic hydra headed by the insufferable Evelyn Thorne, was a constant low-level thrum of anxiety in his life. They policed everything from mailbox paint colors to acceptable shrub heights, their monthly newsletters a passive-aggressive litany of impending doom for any homeowner daring to deviate from their meticulous, soul-crushing vision of suburban perfection. He tore open the envelope, a crisp official rustle cutting through the lazy hum of the afternoon. His eyes scanned the dense legal jargon, then snagged on the bolded sentence, a chilling directive that ripped through his tranquility like a bullet. Notice is hereby given that the swimming pool located on your property at 14 Willow Creek Lane is deemed a non-conforming structure and must be removed and the excavation filled within 90 days of the date of this letter. Arthur's breath hitched. Removed? Filled? A cold wave washed over him, dousing the warmth of the sun and the joyful sounds of his children. He reread the line, then the entire paragraph, searching for a loophole, a misunderstanding, anything that might soften the blow. There was nothing, just cold, unyielding legalese, citing some obscure, recently clarified bylaw regarding water features and property lines. "What's wrong, honey?" Sarah, his wife, emerged from the sliding glass door, a pitcher of iced tea in her hand, her brow furrowed with concern. The playful chaos of the pool faded into background noise. Arthur handed her the letter, his hand trembling slightly. Sarah's usually serene face paled as she read. "No," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "This can't be right. We've had this pool since before we moved in. It was inspected, approved. It's always been here. They're calling it non-conforming," Arthur said, his voice tight with disbelief, a tremor of anger beginning to ripple through him. Some new interpretation of a setback rule. "This is Evelyn. This has to be Evelyn." Evelyn Thorne, the self-appointed queen of Grand Oaks, a woman whose smile was as thin as her patience, and whose personal crusade against anything she deemed unsightly was legendary. She lived 2 streets over, but her shadow stretched across the entire community. He knew, deep in his gut, that this wasn't about a bylaw. It was personal. Evelyn had always eyed his backyard, his vibrant, unmanicured haven, with a thinly veiled disdain. His pool, a symbol of freedom and joy, was an affront to her meticulously controlled world. The following morning, Arthur went to war. He stormed into the HOA office, a cramped, overly air-conditioned room tucked into the corner of the community clubhouse. The clubhouse, a sterile monument to beige and beige, was Evelyn Thorne's domain. He found her exactly where he expected her to be. Behind a gleaming desk, a pair of half-moon reading glasses perched on her nose, meticulously arranging a stack of invoices. Evelyn was a woman sculpted from sharp angles and tight expressions, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun that seemed to physically embody her rigid adherence to rules. Evelyn? Arthur began, his voice surprisingly calm despite the volcano, bubbling beneath his ribs. We need to talk about this. He slapped the notice down on her desk. She looked up, her gaze flat, unyielding. Mr. Sterling, to what do I owe the pleasure? Her tone was like chipped ice. The pool. This letter. You can't be serious. Oh, but I assure you, Mr. Sterling, we are entirely serious. She took off her glasses, folding them with deliberate slowness. It's all there, plainly stated. The original survey from '98, when your property was first developed, clearly shows a 15-foot setback from the east property line. Your pool, while a feature of the property, extends into that setback by a full 3 feet. It was an oversight, regrettable, but an oversight nonetheless. The board recently reviewed all original blueprints and surveys in light of our ongoing beautification initiative, and your pool was flagged. An oversight for 15 years? It was here when I bought the house. It was approved. I have the original inspection reports, the permits. Arthur's voice rose, losing its calm facade. Indeed, Mr. Sterling, Evelyn said, her voice dropping. To a deceptively calm purr, and a thorough investigation reveals a clerical error in the county records from that time. An administrative snafu, if you will. The HOA is simply rectifying the situation, bringing all properties into compliance with the original intended covenants. This is ridiculous. Rectifying? You want me to fill in a functional, well-maintained pool, a substantial structure because of a clerical error from 2 decades ago? Arthur leaned over the desk, his hands balled into fists. It's costing me thousands to maintain. It's part of the value of my home. Evelyn raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. The value of your home, Mr. Sterling, is subjective. The integrity of our community's covenants, however, is not. We cannot permit a single property to violate the established rules, however long that violation may have gone unnoticed. It sets a dangerous precedent. Dangerous precedent? What precedent? That people enjoy their property? He scoffed. This is personal, isn't it? You don't like my pool. You don't like that my kids laugh too. Loud. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor flickered across Evelyn's lips. Mr. Sterling, such accusations are unprofessional and entirely baseless. The board acts solely in the interest of the community as a whole. And let me remind you, there have been minor complaints about noise levels from your property during peak summer months. She picked up her glasses again, a clear sign the conversation, from her perspective, was over. Complaints? From whom? You? The sources of complaints are confidential, Mr. Sterling. The bylaw is not. You have 90 days. Failure to comply will result in escalating fines, and ultimately, the HOA reserves the right to impose a lien on your property to cover the costs of forced compliance. We have consulted with our legal team. The process is airtight. Arthur stared at her, a hot fury building in his chest. You're serious, he breathed. You're actually going to do this. The HOA is a serious organization. Mr. Sterling, we expect serious adherence to our regulations. She offered him a thin, almost triumphant smile. Have a pleasant day. He stormed out, the air in the clubhouse suddenly too thick, too sterile. The casual cruelty of her words, the chilling finality of her tone, echoed in his ears. This wasn't about rules. It was about power. And Evelyn Thorne wielded it like a scalpel, cutting away at the things that brought people joy. The next few weeks were a blur of frantic phone calls to lawyers, county offices, and zoning commissions. Every door Arthur knocked on seemed to slam, shut in his face. The clerical error was indeed enshrined in some forgotten corner of a dusty archive, and while seemingly arbitrary, it was technically, legally binding. The HOA's position, while draconian, was bulletproof. His existing permits, the inspections from years ago, were all overridden by this newly discovered original survey discrepancy. It's going to cost more to fight it in court than to fill it in, his lawyer advised, regret clear in his voice. And even then, your chances are slim to none. The HOA's covenants are notoriously ironclad in grand oaks. Sarah tried to be strong, but Arthur saw the worry lines deepening around her eyes. "Maybe we could build a smaller one," she suggested, one evening, her voice small. "A prefab, above ground, in the middle of the yard where it's definitely clear of any setbacks?" Arthur just shook his head, staring out at the darkening expanse of his backyard, the pool a dark, still mirror reflecting the rising moon. The thought of filling it in, covering it with dirt, felt like burying a piece of his soul. It was a capitulation, a surrender to the petty tyranny of Evelyn Thorne. He pictured the triumph in her eyes, the quiet satisfaction of seeing him, a perceived rebel brought to heel. The thought burned like acid. Lily and Max, sensing the shift in the family's mood, began asking questions. "Are we going to get rid of the pool, Daddy?" Lily asked, her voice laced with an innocence that twisted Arthur's gut. Max, too young to fully grasp the nuances, simply pointed to the pool and said, "Splash," with a hopeful grin. "How do you explain to your children that a place of pure joy, a haven they loved, was being stolen from them by a soulless bureaucracy? How do you tell them their summer was canceled by a woman who hated fun?" Arthur sank into a grim determination. He wasn't going to just lie down and take it. He wasn't going to let Evelyn Thorne win, not like this. He walked out to the pool. Late one night, the air cool and heavy with the scent of jasmine. He stared into the dark water, the silence. The morning after his epiphany, Arthur Sterling woke with a clarity he hadn't felt in weeks. The fear and frustration that had plagued him were replaced by a cold, sharp resolve. He looked at Sarah sleeping peacefully beside him, then at the photo on his nightstand of Lily and Max, their faces beaming with sticky, sweet summer joy. This wasn't just about a pool anymore. It was about fighting back, about reclaiming a piece of their happiness that Evelyn Thorne had tried to bury under a mountain of bylaws and bureaucratic malice. His first step was research. He spent hours hunched over his laptop, fueled by lukewarm coffee and a simmering indignation. He scoured the Grand Oaks HOA covenants, not for loopholes to save his old pool, but for vulnerabilities, for blind spots, for any obscure clause that might aid his new, audacious plan. He delved into county zoning laws, environmental regulations, and construction permits. He learned about excavation depths, water runoff, property easements, and the precise legal definition of a recreational water feature. He realized, with a growing sense of grim satisfaction, that while the HOA had a vice-like grip on homeowners, their power over community property was surprisingly complex and, in some areas, less absolute than Evelyn presented it to be. The Clubhouse, a jointly owned asset, wasn't quite the impenetrable fortress she imagined. He meticulously plotted the precise dimensions of the clubhouse and its surrounding grounds. His idea was grand, bordering on the insane, but he saw a twisted logic in it. If his pool was non-conforming due to setback issues, perhaps a massive pool, one that encircled the very symbol of their oppression, could be designed to conform to a different, higher standard of public amenity, or at the very least, create such a monumental disruption that Evelyn Thorne would be forced to play by his rules for once. The biggest hurdle, he quickly discovered, would be the financing. Building a pool was expensive. Building a moat-sized pool, one that effectively surrounded a large public building, was astronomical. He certainly didn't have that kind of money lying around. This was when he began thinking about the Grand Oaks Community Pool Fund. Every homeowner paid a hefty annual fee, a portion of which was supposedly earmarked for community improvements, including the maintenance of the existing, pitifully small and often neglected communal pool near the main entrance. That pool, a sterile rectangle of faded tile, was a symbol of the HOA's apathy, rarely used and often closed for unscheduled maintenance. A mischievous gleam entered Arthur's eye. What if his project could be rebranded? What if it could be presented as the ultimate community improvement? The next morning, armed with a fresh set of blueprints, not for his backyard, but for the clubhouse grounds, Arthur approached a trusted friend, Mark Jensen. Mark was an architect known for his eccentric but brilliant designs, and more importantly, a man who shared Arthur's deep-seated skepticism of Evelyn Thorne and her authoritarian tendencies. Arthur laid out the plans on Mark's drafting table, a vast sheet of paper showing the clubhouse at its center, encircled by a sprawling, elegant, undeniably enormous body of water. "I need your help, Mark," he said, pointing to the concentric circles. "I need this to be real, and I need it to be legal." Mark stared, his usually jovial face slack with astonishment. He traced the lines with a skeptical finger. "Arthur, you're not serious, are you? A moat around the clubhouse? The HOA will have your head on a platter. Evelyn will personally lead the pitchfork brigade. They're taking my pool, Mark, my kids' pool, because of a clerical error from 20 years ago. They want to bury my family's joy under dirt. So yes, I'm serious. Deadly serious. This isn't just a pool, it's a statement. A very, very wet statement." Arthur's voice was low, laced with a dangerous calm. "Is it possible? Legally? Environmentally? Structurally?" Mark leaned back, rubbing his chin. "Structurally, yes. If you excavate correctly and have proper drainage and filtration. Environmentally, you'd need a ton of permits, but it's theoretically feasible. Legally, that's where it gets hairy. The HOA owns that land. You can't just build a private amenity on common ground." "Exactly," Arthur said, a sly smile touching his lips. "But what if it's not a private amenity? What if it's a community amenity? A public pool, a grand, magnificent public pool. The kind Grand Oaks has always deserved but never got from the stingy coffers of Evelyn's beautification initiative and that pathetic puddle they call a communal pool." Mark's eyes widened. "You're proposing to use HOA funds for this?" "No," Arthur corrected. "I'm proposing to convince the community that their community pool fund should be used for this, to give them a choice. Their current pool is a joke. This would be legendary. It would put Grand Oaks on the map. Imagine the property values." He knew that last point would sting Evelyn, the ultimate irony. Mark looked at the plans again, a slow grin spreading across his face. "Arthur, you're either a madman or a genius, or both, but it's audacious. I like audacious. It's certainly a conversation starter." He picked up a pencil. "All right, let's explore the architectural and engineering feasibility, but you're going to need more than just plans. You're going to need the community on your side, and that, my friend, is a battle bigger than any bylaw." The next phase was clandestine. Arthur and Mark worked in secret, refining the blueprints. The proposed Grand Oaks water feature and recreational oasis was designed to be not just a pool, but a multi-tiered aquatic wonderland. It incorporated child-friendly shallow areas, lap lanes, even a small artificial island for sunbathing. Most importantly, it completely encircled the clubhouse, leaving only a single gated bridge as access. The visual impact would be undeniable. It was a masterpiece of passive aggression, cloaked in the guise of community enhancement. While Mark worked on the official renderings, Arthur began his quiet campaign. He started with neighbors he knew were tired of the HOA's draconian rules, people who had suffered their own minor indignities at Evelyn's hands. He didn't reveal the full, audacious scope of his plan immediately. Instead, he started with a simple question. "Are you happy with the current community pool?" The answer, universally, was a resounding no. Then he'd gauge their appetite for change, for something truly spectacular. He spoke of Grand Oaks' potential, how it could be a vibrant modern community, not a sterile, soulless one. He hinted at a vision for a next-generation community aquatic center funded by their existing fees. He presented it as a chance to vote for progress, for enjoyment, for something truly grand in Grand Oaks. Slowly, carefully, he cultivated support. He talked to parents whose children were bored with the existing facilities, to retirees who dreamed of gentle water aerobics, to teenagers who longed for a place to hang out. He built a quiet underground network of discontent, a whisper campaign that gradually gained momentum. Sarah, initially skeptical, became his most ardent supporter. "This isn't just about your pool anymore, is it?" she said one evening, watching him pore over zoning maps. "It's about the whole community, about standing up to her." Arthur nodded, tracing the outline of the proposed moat around the clubhouse. "Exactly. It's about showing them that they have a choice, that the HOA isn't an unchallengeable dictator, and that sometimes the best defense is a wildly extravagant offense." The day finally came for the monthly HOA board meeting. Arthur arrived early, clutching a large, flat portfolio. He'd signed up for the public comment section, a routine 5-minute slot usually reserved for mundane complaints about overgrown hedges or misplaced recycling bins. Evelyn Thorne, seated at the head of the long conference table, surveyed the room with her usual imperious air. She spotted Arthur, and her lips thinned into a familiar line of disapproval. She clearly expected him to make a final desperate plea for his backyard. Pool. The meeting proceeded, a monotonous drone of budgetary reports and committee updates. Arthur felt the tension coiling in his stomach, a mix of anticipation and pure, unadulterated fear. This was it, the moment of truth. Finally, Evelyn announced, "Next, we have Mr. Arthur Sterling for public comment." Her voice held a note of weary resignation, as if bracing herself for a tiresome but predictable outburst. Arthur stood up, walked to the podium, and placed his portfolio on the stand. He looked directly at Evelyn, then slowly surveyed the faces of the other board members and finally the smattering of residents in the audience, many of whom he had subtly rallied. "Good evening, Madam President, board members, residents," he began, his voice steady, projecting confidence he didn't entirely feel. "I'm here tonight not to discuss my personal property, but the future of our collective property, specifically our community's aquatic facilities." A few murmurs rippled through the room. Evelyn's brow furrowed slightly. This wasn't the expected tirade. "As many of you know," Arthur continued, "the current community pool is adequate, but it hardly lives up to the grand in Grand Oaks. It's small, it's often closed, and frankly, it's an embarrassment compared to what other communities offer." He paused for effect, letting his words sink in. He could see some residents nodding subtly. "For too long," he pressed on, "our community pool fund has been underutilized, its potential wasted on minor repairs and a facility that doesn't inspire. I believe it's time for Grand Oaks to invest in a truly spectacular, state-of-the-art aquatic center, something that will not only enhance." The silence in the Grand Oaks HOA meeting room was thicker than concrete. It stretched, taut and agonizing, broken only by the hum of the fluorescent lights. Evelyn Thorne remained frozen, her eyes glued to the blueprint, a silent scream etched on her face. The other board members, a mix of the bewildered and the outright amused, began to whisper. In the audience, the murmurs swelled into an excited buzz, like a hive of bees suddenly offered a taste of honey. Arthur Sterling stood his ground, a calm, almost serene expression on his face. He watched Evelyn savoring the moment. Her usual formidable composure had shattered, replaced by raw, incandescent fury. Finally, she found her voice, a strangled, high-pitched squawk. "Mr. Sterling, what is this abomination? This is outrageous, a grotesque mockery." Her hand trembled as she pointed an accusatory finger at the blueprint. "Madam President," Arthur replied, his voice still steady, "as I clearly stated, This is a proposal for a state-of-the-art community aquatic center, the Grand Oaks Water Feature and Recreational Oasis, as we've tentatively named it. It's designed to transform our community, provide unparalleled recreational opportunities, and significantly increase property values. He gestured grandly to the rendering. As you can see, it also thoughtfully incorporates our existing community clubhouse as a central island feature, enhancing its aesthetic appeal. Enhancing its aesthetic appeal? Evelyn shrieked, slamming her fist on the table. You've proposed to dig a giant ditch around our clubhouse. A moat! You're proposing a moat around the HOA headquarters. A water feature, Madam President. With all due respect, the terminology is important, Arthur corrected, a hint of steel entering his tone. And it's a community water feature funded by the community's own accumulated community pool fund. A fund, I might add, that has been rather underutilized for years, while our existing community pool remains a dismal disappointment. Another board member, old Mr. Henderson, a man usually too timid to challenge Evelyn, cleared his throat. Arthur has a point, Evelyn. The pool is rather sad. And the fund, it's substantial, isn't it? Evelyn spun on him, her eyes blazing. Mr. Henderson, this is not about the fund. This is about a delusional homeowner attempting to extort the board by presenting a preposterous, unfeasible, utterly insane plan. Is it unfeasible, Madam President? Arthur countered smoothly. My architect, Mark Jensen, a highly respected professional, assures me it is entirely feasible from an engineering and construction standpoint. We have preliminary environmental impact assessments, drainage plans, and a detailed budget proposal, all drawn up to meet county regulations for public recreational facilities. He produced another sheaf of documents from his portfolio, placing them on the table. And as for insane, I believe the community has a right to decide what they consider valuable. Perhaps a grand aquatic oasis is more sensible than forcing a homeowner to fill in a perfectly good pool due to a clerical error from 2 decades ago. The last phrase, delivered with a pointed gaze at Evelyn, landed like a perfectly aimed dart. A ripple of low-grade applause started in the back of the room, fueled by the residents Arthur had quietly cultivated. Parents whispered excitedly about the slides they imagined. Teenagers giggled about parties. "Silence!" Evelyn roared, her face a mottled red. "This is a board meeting, not a public circus. Mr. Sterling, your 5 minutes are up." This proposal is rejected. Out of hand. It's ludicrous. It's a waste of everyone's time, and frankly, it's personally offensive. With all due respect, Madam President, a voice called from the audience. It was Mrs. Rodriguez, a retired teacher known for her quiet but firm demeanor. I think Mr. Sterling's proposal, while certainly ambitious, deserves to be heard. Many of us are tired of the stagnant state of our community amenities, and the idea of using the community pool fund for something truly spectacular rather than letting it just sit there or be used for minor repairs on an inadequate facility is compelling. Other voices chimed in. Yeah, our kids deserve better. It would really boost our property values. The current pool is a joke. Evelyn's eyes darted around the room, seeing the tide turning against her. This wasn't just Arthur anymore. It was a burgeoning rebellion. This board, she declared, her voice trembling with indignation, is not swayed by populist whims. We operate on due diligence and responsible governance. This project would be astronomical in cost, disruptive to the entire community, and an unprecedented, frankly ugly alteration to the common grounds. Actually, Evelyn, said Mr. Davies, another board member cautiously, Arthur did mention the community pool fund, and our financials do show a rather substantial balance there. Perhaps we should at least discuss the budget implications. And the property value argument isn't entirely without merit. Evelyn glared at Mr. Davies, her expression venomous. Are you questioning my fiscal management, Mr. Davies? Not at all, Madam President. Just exploring options for community improvement. The meeting devolved into chaos. Evelyn tried to gavel order, but the momentum had shifted. The residents, emboldened by Arthur's audacious proposal and the visible cracks in Evelyn's authority, began to speak louder, expressing their long, simmering discontent. The discussion quickly spiraled beyond the pool itself, touching on other HOA grievances, the overly strict landscaping rules, the lack of community events, the general feeling of being micromanaged. Arthur stood back, allowing the storm he had unleashed to rage. He had provided the spark, and now the community's pent-up frustrations were the fuel. He watched Evelyn, her face a mask of escalating panic. She was losing control, and she knew it. Finally, defeated by the sheer volume of dissent, Evelyn slammed her gavel one last time, a sound that was more a frustrated thump than an authoritative crack. "Fine," she spat, her voice tight with suppressed rage. "Since you insist on wasting board resources, we will form a committee, a special Community Aquatic Facilities Review Committee. They will review Mr. Sterling's ludicrous proposal, assess its feasibility, its financial implications, and present their findings at the next quarterly meeting. But let me be clear, Mr. Sterling, this is merely a formality. This project will never see the light of day. It's a non-starter." "Thank you, Madam President," Arthur said, a genuine smile now playing on his lips. "I look forward to working with the committee, and I'm sure the community will appreciate the transparency." He knew a committee was a delaying tactic, a bureaucratic black hole designed to kill ideas. But it was also an acknowledgement, a grudging concession. He had forced her hand. As residents filed out, many stopped to shake Arthur's hand, offering words of encouragement and admiration. "That was brilliant, Arthur. About time someone stood up to her. A moat. I love it." Arthur felt a surge of triumph, but it was tempered by the grim reality of the battle ahead. Evelyn wouldn't give up. Easily. He knew she would stack that committee with her cronies, ensure that every obstacle imaginable was placed in his path. But he had won the first round. He had brought the fight to her, on her turf, and he had planted a seed of revolution in the community. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity for Arthur. He was officially notified of the Special Community Aquatic Facilities Review Committee, which, as expected, was chaired by Evelyn Thorne herself. The other members were two of her most loyal, rule-abiding allies, Mrs. Albright, a stickler for budgets and decorum, and Mr. Peterson, a retired engineer who typically sided with whatever minimized perceived risk. Arthur, however, was also appointed to the committee, a move that Evelyn likely intended to be a form of controlled opposition, forcing him to witness the project's inevitable demise from the inside. But Arthur saw it as an opportunity. The first committee meeting was a frosty affair in a small, windowless room within the clubhouse. Evelyn, tight-lipped and radiating disdain, began by reiterating the obvious impracticality of Arthur's proposal. Mrs. Albright presented a preliminary cost estimate, inflated with every possible contingency and unforeseen expense, making the project appear astronomically unaffordable. Mr. Peterson listed a litany of potential engineering challenges, from soil stability to water purification on such a large scale, painting a picture of environmental disaster. "As you can see, Mr. Sterling," Evelyn concluded, leaning back with a smug expression, "your oasis is nothing more than a pipe dream, an irresponsible fantasy." Arthur, however, had come prepared. He had anticipated their every move. He pulled out Mark Jensen's meticulously detailed counter-arguments, which he had spent days memorizing. He systematically dismantled Mrs. Albright's inflated budget, showing where costs could be significantly reduced through clever design and phased construction. He presented alternative water purification systems, more efficient pumps, and even a proposal for a dedicated green filtration system utilizing natural wetlands within a portion of the moat's design, which would make the project environmentally innovative. He addressed Mr. Peterson's engineering concerns with a calm, well-researched rebuttal, citing precedents from other large-scale public water features and offering to bring in an independent geological survey team at his own expense if necessary. He presented financial models that demonstrated how the project, over time, would actually increase the value of Grand Oaks properties, potentially offsetting a POR. Evelyn Thorne was a woman who dealt in predictable reactions: righteous indignation, bureaucratic obstruction, and passive-aggressive maneuvering. Arthur Sterling had, for the first time, thrown her off balance. Her defeat at the committee meeting, however minor, fueled a renewed, colder determination. She wouldn't just try to kill his project. She would try to kill him, metaphorically speaking, in the eyes of the community. The HOA newsletter, usually a dry, predictable document, suddenly transformed into a thinly veiled propaganda sheet. The July edition featured a prominent article on fiscal responsibility and prudent management of community funds, replete with dire warnings about reckless spending and unforeseen liabilities. It didn't mention Arthur or his water feature, but the implication was clear. Another article detailed the hidden dangers of large water bodies, citing obscure statistics about drowning accidents and increased insurance premiums, subtly aiming at the proposed moat. Simultaneously, Evelyn began holding informal coffees with the president at the Clubhouse, strategically inviting long-standing conservative residents, those who valued stability and low fees above all else. She painted Arthur's vision as a fiscally irresponsible boondoggle, a frivolous expense that would raise HOA dues and attract undesirable elements to their quiet, upscale community. She subtly whispered doubts about his character, suggesting his motives were purely selfish, a desperate act of vengeance for his own pool. Arthur felt the ground shifting. The initial wave of excitement from some residents was now being countered by Evelyn's steady campaign of fear and misinformation. He saw the suspicious glances, the hesitant smiles, the sudden reluctance of some neighbors to engage in conversation. His kids, Lily and Max, even began hearing things from their friends, whispers about their dad being crazy or making trouble. Lily came home one day, her eyes wide, asking, "Daddy, Mrs. Peterson told Billy that if we build the new pool, our allowance from Grandpa might get smaller because the HOA will take more money. Is that true?" The question hit Arthur like a punch to the gut. Evelyn wasn't just fighting him, she was weaponizing fear against his family. He knew he couldn't fight Evelyn's whispers with more facts in committee meetings. He needed a different approach. A way to appeal directly to the community's emotions, to reignite the dream he had initially sparked. His opportunity came with the annual Grand Oaks Summer Fair, a sleepy, low-key event held on the community green, usually dominated by bake sales and a lukewarm hot dog stand. Arthur, with Sarah's enthusiastic support, decided to turn it into his campaign launchpad. They set up a booth, not with dry blueprints, but with vibrant, large-scale artist renderings of the Grand Oaks aquatic oasis. Mark Jensen had created a stunning 3D fly-through video showing children laughing, families picnicking on the artificial island, and sparkling water reflecting the sun. It was presented on a large screen, drawing curious onlookers. Beside it, Sarah had set up a dream pool suggestion board where kids could draw their ideas for the new pool, filling it with whimsical slides and diving boards. Arthur and Sarah stood tirelessly at the booth, engaging with every resident. They addressed Evelyn's accusations head-on. "Yes," Arthur would say, "it's a significant investment, but it's an investment in our community, for our children, for our property values. The Community Pool Fund has enough to kickstart this without immediate fee hikes, and studies show that vibrant community amenities actually reduce crime, not increase it, by fostering a stronger sense of belonging." Sarah, with her natural warmth, focused on the emotional appeal. "Imagine your kids having a truly magnificent place to play all summer. Imagine community events, swimming lessons, a real gathering spot. This isn't just about a pool. It's about building a better, more connected Grand Oaks. The reaction was immediate and overwhelmingly positive. The visuals were powerful, the message resonated, and Arthur and Sarah's genuine enthusiasm was infectious. Kids dragged their parents to the booth, mesmerized by the video, begging for the Moat pool. Teenagers saw a place where they could actually hang out. Older residents remembered the glory days of community spirit. "I signed up for Evelyn's committee thinking it was a waste of time," confided Mr. Peterson, the retired engineer, to Arthur. "But after seeing this and hearing your arguments, I'm starting to think you might be onto something, Arthur. This isn't just a pool. It's a legacy. I've started running some of my own calculations, and your cost estimates are surprisingly accurate, even conservative." Evelyn, observing the growing crowd around Arthur's booth from across the fairgrounds, seethed. Her own booth, offering dry brochures on covenant compliance, was deserted. She watched as a group of teenagers, giggling, posed for a selfie in front of Arthur's rendering, flashing peace signs. This was her community, her orderly domain, being turned into a carnival of dissent. She strode purposefully towards Arthur's booth, her face a thundercloud. "Mr. Sterling," she snapped, her voice cutting through the festive chatter. "This is inappropriate. You are using a community event to disseminate misleading information and promote a fiscally irresponsible personal agenda." Arthur turned, a calm, almost pitying smile on his face. "Madam President, welcome. We were just discussing the future of Grand Oaks, and as you can see, the community seems quite interested." He gestured to the crowd. "This is not a referendum, Mr. Sterling," Evelyn declared, raising her voice. "The special committee will make its recommendation, and let me assure you that recommendation will be unanimous in its rejection of this folly." She swept a dismissive hand towards the rendering. A young mother, cradling her baby, stepped forward. "Excuse me, Mrs. Thorne," she said, her voice clear and firm. "With all due respect, we pay HOA fees. A lot of fees. And we have a right to say how our money is spent. Mr. Sterling's idea is exciting. Your current pool is a puddle. We want this." She pointed to the rendering. Evelyn's eyes widened. This was open rebellion. "This is highly out of order," she sputtered. "You will all abide by the board's decision." "What if the board's decision isn't what the community wants?" piped up a high school student, Max's friend. "Isn't the HOA supposed to represent us?" Evelyn stared, momentarily speechless. The tide had turned, visibly and audibly. The community, once a quiet, compliant mass, was finding its voice, and Arthur Sterling had given them the megaphone. The special committee's final review meeting was scheduled for the first week of August, just days before Arthur's 90-day deadline for filling in his own pool. Evelyn had packed the audience, with her supporters ensuring that every seat was filled by a stoic face. But Arthur's supporters, now more organized and vocal, had also arrived early, ready to make their presence known. The room was tense, crackling with unspoken conflict. Evelyn, at the head of the committee table, began with a lengthy, monotonous reading of the committee's findings, emphasizing every negative point. Mrs. Albright presented the final cost estimate, inflated even further than before, adding in phantom maintenance fees and risk mitigation budgets that effectively quadrupled the original proposal. Mr. Peterson, looking uncomfortable, had to concede that some of Arthur's engineering counter-arguments had merit, but he quickly retreated, adding a caveat about unforeseen geological anomalies. Therefore, Evelyn concluded, her voice laced with triumph, the committee has come to the unanimous conclusion that Mr. Sterling's proposal, while imaginative, is financially unfeasible, structurally unsound, and ultimately not in the best interest of the Grand Oaks community. She looked directly at Arthur, a smug, victorious smile on her face. "It is rejected." A wave of disappointed murmurs swept through Arthur's supporters. Evelyn's allies offered polite, satisfied nods. She prepared to gavel the meeting to a close, a triumphant glint in her eye. "Madam President?" A clear, strong voice cut through the air. It was Mr. Peterson. He pushed his glasses up his nose, his gaze steady. I must object to the term unanimous. I cannot in good conscience concur with the committee's final recommendation as presented. My own independent review of Mr. Sterling's revised budget and engineering proposals, coupled with further consultations I took the liberty of undertaking with independent consultants, indicates that the project is indeed feasible, and the costs, while substantial, are not prohibitive, especially given the balance in the community pool fund. A collective gasp ripped through the room. Evelyn Thorne's triumphant smile shattered. Her jaw dropped, her eyes wide with shock. Mr. Peterson, her loyal, risk-averse ally, had just publicly betrayed her. The unanimous rejection had just become a deeply embarrassing, deeply public, and utterly devastating dissent. The air in the Grand Oaks HOA meeting room was no longer thick with silence, but electric with a collective gasp, followed by a roar of approval from Arthur's supporters. Evelyn Thorne's face, already a mottled red, now shifted to a horrifying shade of purple. Mr. Peterson, usually a man who preferred to blend into the wallpaper, stood his ground, his gaze unwavering under Evelyn's incandescent fury. "Mr. Peterson!" Evelyn shrieked, her voice cracking with rage. "Are you deliberately undermining this committee? Your professional integrity is called into question. This is insubordination." "Madam President," Mr. Peterson replied, his voice calm but firm, "my professional integrity demands that I speak the truth. My initial assessment, influenced by committee discussions, contained errors. Upon further independent review, Mr. Sterling's proposal, while ambitious, is indeed viable. The numbers add up, the engineering challenges are solvable, and the community pool fund is more than adequate to begin this project without raising immediate HOA dues." He turned to the other two committee members, Mrs. Albright and Mr. Davies. "I believe we owe the community an honest assessment, not one dictated by preconceived notions." Mrs. Albright, who had always been a rigid follower of rules, now looked genuinely conflicted, glancing between Evelyn's furious face and Mr. Peterson's resolute stance. Mr. Davies, who had shown mild support for Arthur previously, nodded slowly, almost imperceptibly. Evelyn, sensing her control slipping like sand through her fingers, pounded the gavel. "This is preposterous. This committee's recommendation stands. A single dissenting voice does not negate the will of the majority, but the majority of the community wants this," a voice from the audience shouted, followed by a chorus of agreement. "Let us vote! Give us a referendum!" The room erupted. Arthur's supporters, now fully emboldened, demanded a community-wide vote. Evelyn's allies, flustered and outnumbered, tried to quiet them, but the momentum was unstoppable. Evelyn, desperate, searched for a lifeline. She slammed the gavel again. "Silence! The HOA bylaws do not permit an immediate community-wide referendum. On such matters, the board makes decisions." "Excuse me, Madam President," Arthur interjected, stepping forward. He held up a thick book, the Grand Oaks HOA Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions, open to a specific page. Article 5, Section 3, Subsection B, clearly states, "Should a committee recommendation on a major capital improvement project fail to achieve unanimous approval, and should a petition signed by 25% or more of the registered homeowners be presented to the board, a special community-wide vote shall be scheduled within 30 days. "Evelyn," he said, his voice dropping to a calm, deadly whisper that carried across the hushed room, "we already have the signatures. Over 50% of registered homeowners have signed this petition demanding a vote on the Grand Oaks Aquatic Oasis." He laid a massive stack of signed petitions on the table. Evelyn stared at them, her mouth agape. This wasn't just planning. This was a coup. Arthur had outmaneuvered her at every turn. Defeat, cold and absolute, washed over Evelyn Thorne. There was no escape. The bylaws, her own sacred text, mandated it. Her face contorted into a mask of pure fury and humiliation. This is an outrage, she hissed, but her voice lacked its usual bite. It was the sound of a queen dethroned. The special community-wide vote was scheduled for 3 weeks later at the largest hall available in the county. Evelyn Thorne, despite her public humiliation, mounted one last, desperate offensive. Her flyers warned of bankruptcy, of undesirable elements taking over their tranquil community, of property values plummeting. She called individual homeowners, delivering emotional pleas, painting Arthur as a greedy, vindictive man. But Arthur and Sarah, with the help of Mr. Peterson and the growing groundswell of community support, countered every accusation. They held town halls, not just at the clubhouse, but at local schools and parks, bringing out their stunning visuals and Mark's detailed financial breakdowns. They brought Lily and Max to events, allowing their infectious excitement for the Moat pool to be the most powerful argument of all. "This is for them," Sarah would say, gesturing to her children, "for the next generation of Grand Oaks." The day of the vote arrived, hot and humid. Lines stretched out the door of the community hall. The tension was palpable. Arthur felt a knot in his stomach, but looking at the determined faces of his neighbors, he felt a surge of hope. The results were announced that evening, carried live on the local Grand Oaks Facebook group, which Arthur's campaign had fully mobilized. The moderator, a nervous young board member, cleared his throat, reading from a sealed envelope. The results of the special community-wide vote on the Grand Oaks Aquatic Oasis are as follows: 212 votes against, 895 votes for. The Grand Oaks Aquatic Oasis passes. A thunderous cheer erupted, shaking the very foundations of the hall. People hugged, tears streamed down faces, and children jumped with unbridled glee. Arthur felt Sarah's arms tighten around him, and he pulled Lily and Max into a tight embrace. They had done it. They had won. Evelyn Thorne was not present at the announcement. She had barricaded herself in her immaculate home, listening to the news through her closed windows. The sounds of celebration, carried on the summer breeze, were a torturous symphony of her defeat. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of construction permits, contractor bids, and groundbreaking ceremonies. Arthur's old pool was filled in, a symbolic act of compliance with the HOA's original demand, but now a hollow victory for Evelyn. Every morning he watched the heavy machinery arrive, their engines rumbling as the earth around the clubhouse began to be excavated. The construction took months, a monumental undertaking that transformed the heart of Grand Oaks. Neighbors would gather, watching with fascination as the massive hole took shape, then was lined, then filled with sparkling water. The old, neglected community pool was quietly decommissioned and turned into a landscaped garden, a relic of a past era. Finally, on a warm, sunny Saturday, exactly 1 year after Arthur received Evelyn's letter, the Grand Oaks Aquatic Oasis had its grand opening. The entire community was there. Lily and Max, now a year older, led the charge, racing to be the first to splash into the vast, shimmering expanse. The water, a brilliant sapphire blue, perfectly encircled the elegant clubhouse, now truly an island. A beautifully arched stone bridge, complete with wrought iron railings, spanned the moat, providing the sole access point. Arthur stood with Sarah and Mark Jensen, watching the pure joy erupting around them. The sounds of laughter, shouts, and splashing were deafening, a triumphant anthem of community reclaimed. Across the water, on the second-story balcony of the clubhouse, a lone figure stood, shrouded in shadow. It was Evelyn Thorne. She watched, the joyous chaos below, her face a mask of bitter resentment, her eyes narrowed to slits. Her kingdom, Her meticulously ordered domain was now a vibrant, chaotic, joyful island, forever encircled by the very thing she had tried to destroy. A bigger, grander, more magnificent pool. And every single day, to access her cherished clubhouse, she would have to cross Arthur Sterling's moat. It was a monument to